exclusively on ESPN Plus. UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Pazzi. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Welcome to No One Told Us, the podcast that tells the truth about parenting and talks about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I'm your host, Rachel, and today I'm so excited to speak with Ben Lutz, dad of FUNemployed Family. In 2018, after more than a decade of rat racing and corporate ladder climbing, he and his wife realized that they were firmly on the hamster wheel of life and feared that they would regret not spending more time with their young daughter. They quit their jobs, sold their house and most of their possessions, and set off on a gap year around the world with their toddler. They were looking for a life and career reset, and boy did they find it. For the past 6 years, Ben and his family have been on a digital nomad journey, traveling full-time to 35 countries with their now 2 children, while working remotely and world schooling the kids along the way. Ben, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited for this episode. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your background? What were you actually doing prior to deciding to travel the world? What was your line of work?
I was in finance, and my wife and I actually met. We were both in finance and accounting. We actually met the very first day of new hire training at a CPA firm right out of college. We did that for, 13 years before we finally had this epiphany that there's more to life, and we just wanted to kind of make sure we enjoyed it before we got older and had kids that we were, that were already 30 years old, and we were kind of wondering what happened. So we were in finance and accounting and based in the San Francisco Bay Area.
I'm in San Francisco as well. I don't think I knew that you were from the Bay Area. I really want to get into all of the tips that you've gathered on traveling with kids, because every time I love traveling with my kids. My husband's a little more nervous and anxious about it, but I really push us to do it because I think it's so important and so good for them. But I do always get questions like, how are you making this work? How are you affording this? Before we kind of get into all of the tips and things that you've learned, I would love to just hear how you planned for this financially. I mean, you're in finance, so you probably did a pretty good job, but I think that's a really big sticking point for people is they think that these trips and doing something like this has to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or take years and years of planning. So how did you kind of go about that?
Yeah, it's a very common question we get as well. So I think the big misconception on cost comes down to, most people are working their careers. They may get 2, 3, 4 weeks off a year. And so they splurge during that time when they travel. They spend $10,000 for a 1-week vacation to Hawaii, or they go to Disney with the kids. And we know that's crazy expensive. But when you put it in a perspective of you're selling your house, you're getting rid of a lot of your possessions, you're getting rid of your car, no more car insurance, no more payments, all of that then becomes income or cost avoidance that you can basically apply that to something else. So it doesn't necessarily come across as expensive as you may think. And then also traveling slowly, you can really have a huge savings there. So we have noticed that it's actually been less expensive traveling the world full time than we had in our daily life when we were in California. How we planned for it was for that first gap year is we basically, like you said, we're both in finance. We made a good budget. We didn't jump into it head first. We planned for about 6 months and said, okay, about how much do we think we're going to need? We did a lot of research online. We went on social media. We followed other families that were doing something similar, asked them questions just to try to get a base. And then basically we told ourselves we're going to use part of the savings that we had built up over all those years working really hard and take a year off, basically, and kind of reset our careers, reset our priorities in life. And so we knew it was kind of like a mid-career retirement, if you will, like a 1-year retirement at that time. So we didn't work. At that time, we built up social channels that kind of came out of wanting to just share our experience with our family and friends, and turned into more than that. With people wanting to see what we're up to, follow along. And so long story short, yeah, it's the financial side has been surprisingly less expensive than I think most people think.
And so how did you choose those first destinations when you thought that it was going to be just a 1 year thing?
To be totally honest, we were trying to follow the sun and the warmth. So for two reasons. One, because we like kind of tropical weather. We like a lot of the destinations that that are near the equator, kind of that tropical vibe. But at the same time, we also wanted to pack light, and so knowing and purposely planning to go to locations where you can wear the same outfits all year and you don't have to pack winter coats or boots. Yeah, it was, I mean, that was a big part of it as well, to make sure that we're traveling as light as we can. We're already going to be having, we'll have our toddler with us, which is, an adventure in of itself. So we wanted to pack light. We wanted to be, have basic, basic clothes that we didn't need to have multiple seasonality with us. So basically, yeah, we just followed the weather. We started with a month in Tahoe, just because that's kind of our happy place and that we would escape to a lot. And then we visited family in Michigan for about 6 weeks, went to Europe for about 8 weeks over the summer, and then continued on to Southeast Asia for 4 months, kind of through the winter, and then Australia, New Zealand, and then kind of wrapped it up with some time in French Polynesia, and then back into Mexico So yeah, we basically followed the warmth.
You truly did like around the world in that first year. What was it along the way that made you kind of look at each other and think we should just do this full time forever?
I mean, obviously there's the desire to keep exploring new places was huge. But I think for us, it was really all that time that we had spent, as soon as my wife became pregnant with our first child, we were in San Francisco. We did the freak out. We said, we got to get rid of our 1-bedroom rent controlled apartment. We got to get a 4-door car because we had like a 2-door Wrangler back then and a Vespa. Like, that's not going to work. So we put all of our money and all of our life savings into a small little house, tiny little house in San Rafael in Marin County. And so we thought, okay, we're on the path. We did it. We made it. We bought a house in Marin. But a year into that, we thought, okay, this wasn't all it was chalked up to be. So we basically realized that we were not spending time with our daughter. She was in daycare. We were spending $3,000 a month to have someone else look after her and spend time with her and raise her. And, we were working hard and realizing that, okay, if we want to have a second child, that's another $3,000 a month for daycare. We have this huge mortgage. We were super successful, and we weren't even in tech. So like we felt successful even in the Bay Area not being in tech. But we were like, this isn't going to work financially. Like we're going to outgrow this house in like 2 or 3 years, need a bigger one. So like we saw the material things that we're going to need to be piling up just to continue our level of life. And that scared us. We're like, we're going to be on this hamster wheel working hard just to maintain, let alone carve out more time with the kids. And so that's what scared us the most. And we thought, okay, we could be 65 before we know it and put all of our life into this perfect scenario on paper, but regret not spending time with the kids. So during that year, we basically said, how can we create new careers that give us flexibility where maybe money isn't the primary goal? Like we want time. So we kind of started that year saying we can always fall back on our careers if this doesn't work, but let's look for new and exciting ventures that we can go into. So during that year, as we started our social media channels and they kind of took off a bit, I thought, okay, after this year, maybe I'll go into photography. I'll do something more creative. Near the end of that year, my wife was able to get a job through her network, remotely working in finance. So she was basically, able to fall back into her old career, but do it remotely. And this is pre-COVID. So that was a pretty huge deal. And then I started into real estate photography. And so we basically said, okay, like we've carved time out, we're not working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. We're working a little bit less than that, but we have more time. And so that was the main goal, is to look at life a little differently and try to get off of the materialistic train and more onto the time with family train. And so, yeah, that's how it started. And then, my wife is still doing remote financial consulting on her own now. So she's got clients and she seems to enjoy it, and it's been great for the last 5 years. And then I've kind of moved a bit away from social media and gone back and forth with things. And now I'm working for a company and kind of on the front end marketing and sales It's actually the company that our kids are going to school through, and we're still traveling through, so we can touch on that later. But yeah, it was basically just a point in time where we needed a change, and we realized money was not the ultimate end goal for us.
So cool. I hear you. I'm in the Bay Area, and it does feel just like this never-ending acquisition of stuff and outsourcing of everything in your life just to like make ends meet and have your kids, I would love to do what you're doing. I'm going to have my husband listen to this immediately before it even goes live and try to convince him that we could do this too. I've been pushing for like a year. I'm like, what if we just lived in Hawaii for a year? Or what if, like, I'm not even pushing to travel that much, just to like do something different. I think I've got him now maybe to agree to like a 3 or 4 or 5 week thing. And we'll just see if I can get him to like fall in love with the place and never want to come back.
Hawaii is actually how it started for us. We went on a trip when our daughter was about 1, and we went to Hawaii for a week, and we came back and went, all right, let's see what we can do to move here. And we went through some different business ideas and everything. And then it slowly turned into like, well, let's maybe do, a year, like 3 months in 4 places. And then that turned into, well, if we're doing that already, maybe we could make it like one month per destination. And it ended up that year ended up being 22 countries. So we started off with can we spend a year in Hawaii? And it turned into 22 countries around the world.
I'll turn the Hawaii idea into 22 countries and I would be thrilled. We actually just did like our first big international trip with our kids. So our kids are actually really similar ages. I have an almost 7-year-old like you and a 4-year-old like you. And then we also have a toddler. And we haven't really, we traveled a lot before we had kids, but then it felt really overwhelming when we first had the baby. And then it was COVID with my second. And so we kind of have just started to get brave again. And we went to Portugal. Absolutely loved it. But I was so surprised with how many people said this to me. And I know people say this to you too. It's such a waste of money. It's such a waste of time. They're never going to remember it. They don't appreciate it. Have people said this to you too? And what is your response to that? Has a trip ever actually not been worth it to you? Or is it always worth it in the end?
Oh man, that comment I have received hundreds of times over the years. And it's probably the one comment that like, I feel like I have great comebacks to it, but it also, every time I hear it, it's like, oh, it gets my blood boiling. It's like one of those, the very first thing I think of is like, well, do you not read books to your children when they're little? Do you not sing them lullabies because they're not going to remember?
Just lock them in a closet because they're not going to remember anything anyway. Like it doesn't make sense.
Life experiences, no matter whether they remember them or not, help shape who they are. And the other thing that immediately pops to mind is like my life and my wife's life. Our lives don't end when you have kids, right? Like we will treasure these memories, and we're not doing it just for us, of course, but we will treasure these memories until we die. Like all the time that we spent and the experiences and seeing the joy in the kids' faces and like just, helping them when they ask questions about like, what is the currency like in here? What language did they speak here? What is the food like? Just, the world and travel in general, even if it's just within the United States, is like such an educational tool that I think that it's a gift that you can give your kids. And again, it doesn't have to be far away places. It can just be getting outside of your comfort zone, getting out of your town, trying a new thing. So yeah, I get that question a lot. I don't know that we've ever had an experience that we came away from not thinking it was worth it. Like some have been more, I don't know, just perfect and magical than others. Obviously, the other thing that comes to mind when that comment comes about is that, real life happens every day with kids, whether you're at home or whether you're in Portugal, for example, right? So like you probably had a meltdown with one of your kids in Portugal, I bet. But is that to say it's not gonna happen at home, right?
I'd rather be in Portugal listening to the crying, honestly. So it's fine for me.
Exactly. So I don't think we've ever had a situation where we came away saying, no, it's not, that really wasn't worth it. We've had destinations that we've been to that we absolutely loved and we try to go back to. And then we have some that were like, cool, we liked it, got our good experience, got a taste of it, but maybe not next time. But yeah, no, I think there's so much to be gained by from family bonding aspect, going with the kids. When you're all doing something new for the first time together, it's like instant bonding, right? Like
Yeah.
the kids see that you're at the same level as they are when it comes to this new place. And I think that's just such a cool dynamic in the family.
It really is. I remember when we were in Portugal and we were just, our kids were asking us like how to say certain phrases, or like you said, they were asking all about the money, and seeing them see us kind of like struggle with something or like have something be new for us too, I think was just such a cool lesson for them that like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. Not even grown-ups know everything. The lessons that they learn are just endless. It's so cool. Okay. So, and I do want to ask you your most favorite destination and your least favorite at the end. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to get some just like general tips and tricks for traveling, specifically flying with little kids. We'll be right back. Okay, Ben. So I would imagine you've taken hundreds of flights with your kids at this point. What are the easiest ages, in your opinion, to travel with? What are the most difficult? What tips and tricks have you gathered along the way? Because a lot of people are really intimidated by traveling with their kids simply because of the flights, because they can seem really scary.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I would say now that our daughter is 7, and she, like you said, she's been on, we're pushing, I think, close to 180 flights for her. So
Wow.
it's like second nature. She, at that age, she's super self-sufficient, right? Like we can also maybe touch on like devices and when to bring those and introduce those, and like, or if if you want to or not. It's a touchy subject. It's a hot topic.
Yeah. Yep.
So for her, like for us at that age, I guess I should back up. When she was really young, when we started traveling a lot with her, I don't think we introduced an iPad until she was at least probably pushing 4. And it was all like educational based things, and it was very limited on time. As time has gone on, like we struggle with that. Like me growing up, like I didn't have devices like that. It just didn't exist. So it's hard. We are the parents of this generation that are really the first ones going through how much is too much, how much is actually helpful with certain development and certain apps that are actually sometimes even better than us at helping guide them through different concepts and things. But anyways, it's a hot topic, obviously. But so when we travel on flights specifically, we have a pretty lax policy with our kids on devices. We don't give them very much at all during the week, and like a normal day, they get very, very minimal time. We actually never watch TV. So on the planes, like at the 7 years old, like when she's self-sufficient, she loves coloring. She's still at that age where she's not too cool to like arts and crafts and princesses and like, and all of the fun young girl things. But she loves certain apps, especially the educational ones, which makes me happy. She just loves them. So she's pretty easy, but when they're really young, I think a couple tips that we always used to share, especially on our social channels. So if you have a young one, I always advise, if you're into baby wearing and like, baby Bjorn and that sort of thing, board the plane like that, because that gives you 2 free hands and you don't have to like hold the hand of the toddler. And as you get on the plane, it's so much easier because they're controlled. They can't go anywhere. They're not going to run around. So we always advise like the new parents with little ones to board the plane, like if they can, wearing their baby or their toddler. We use those baby carriers like until they're like 4, literally.
Oh yeah.
Not all the time, but like,
yeah.
And then also we always used to do the one parent board the plane with the carry-ons and the bags, when you're allowed, and the last parent with the toddler board as late as you can. Just stand there, let them get all their wiggles out, do all the things so that they're not on the plane more than they need to be. Another tip that would share, obviously, if you have a really young one and they're still feeding via bottle or breastfeeding, is to make sure that they're feeding when you're ascending and descending, just because that helps them swallow, it helps with the pressure in their ears. And we also would always travel with like infant and toddler Tylenol. We had teething happen on a flight to Hawaii as during that, like I said, that when our daughter was about a year old. And that's the only flight that we've ever had where she was actually like not comfortable for a while. And we learned our lesson on that. And it was just teething, and she basically broke a fever in the middle of that flight, and we were kind of stuck. But yeah, there's a lot of tips for younger ones. I think it definitely gets easier if you once you get to that, say, 4 or 5 and up age. Especially on the longer flights, almost all of them have some sort of like, I think they call them infotainment centers on the back of the seats.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff for the kids to do. And that makes it easier. If you're a strict no device, no screen time family, there are a lot of other things you can do. I've seen families that literally bring sticky notes and have the kids like stick everything just to do something. That's kind of fun, make patterns. And then, we also have those little, they're kind of, it's like a little drawing pad that's electric where you can draw and then you push the button, it erases the whole thing.
Those are so great. We just got one of those too. It's like $8 on Amazon. It's crazy, but they're so fun. And they're light.
And they're super thin.
Yeah, they're perfect. I love those for travel. And we are really not a huge screen time family for our kids. They have like a movie night once a week, and that's kind of it for the most part. But when we are traveling, we will throw those iPads at them so fast and say, have fun, because whatever is going to make your life easier on that flight. Yeah, my kids really were not they just didn't have the attention spans when they were toddlers. So they really didn't get into watching shows and movies till they were like maybe 2.5 or so. But yeah, once my middle one turned 3 and my older one was 5, things became so much easier. And of course, then we had a baby, so it was like starting all over again. But the older 2 were totally taking care of themselves with their iPads and their snacks. It was so easy. So yeah, it definitely does get easier with time. And if you're not comfortable traveling with a little baby, you still can when they get a little bit older. It just gets easier and easier. You mentioned before too, slow travel. What do you mean by that?
Not overdoing, not overpacking your day, first of all, but also slow travel for us. Like when we were doing that gap year and kind of how we've been focusing things the last 5 years, there were other families that were doing that kind of at the same time. And then we kind of categorized each other into fast travelers or slow travelers. Fast travel meaning you're hitting a bunch of countries, you're moving locations every week. It's more stressful, but you're seeing more. So we kind of, during that first year, we did 22 countries. We did have a couple spots where we were somewhere for a whole month, but then we had other locations that we were only there for like 3 days. So I kind of figured that we were mainly fast travelers during that time. It can burn you out, like it for sure. Like the kids, the constant moving. It's cool in its own right, but we have found our groove with slow traveling. We started then, like probably those middle 3 years after the gap year, through till about early 2023, when we were traveling to go for like a month at a time, if we could. Kind of felt like that was a sweet spot. In one location a month, you can soak in a bit more culture. You can really get a sense of that location and the people and the different customs and experiences that you can have there. But now we've kind of gone more almost to like a 3-month. So I think there's benefits in that, you can really get to know that location better, experience the culture. But also I think from, you've probably heard of I think there were some protests, especially in Europe this summer, about mass like over tourism. There's a lot of places, and I mean, we see this around the United States as well. Like, there's a lot of places where Airbnbs or short-term rentals have basically drawn up prices so high that locals can't afford them. Like we saw that. We lived in Tahoe for a year. Same thing there. We have a lot of second homes there. People, and it's happening everywhere, and it's happening abroad. And a lot of people that are coming abroad are, buying up short-term rentals, and then the locals can't. So I think going to like a slower travel mode for us also makes us feel like we're not necessarily contributing to that over tourism like problem where people are coming in for 2 days, they need an Airbnb for 2 nights, and like, so it makes us feel a little better on that regard as well. So like there's pros and cons to different ways of travel, but for us, slow travel is, maybe like a month per destination, or even if you only have a few weeks a year, spend it all in one spot. Like don't hop around so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that advice. So I mentioned we went to Portugal this past summer, and our original itinerary, because I was so ambitious and I was like, oh my gosh, I finally got my husband to agree to a Europe trip with our 3 kids. Let me see everything. And I had originally booked, we were going to start in Paris, which was so stupid because it was the Olympics. We were going to start in Paris. We were going to go to Milan, Lake Como, Lake Garda. Like I had all of these. And then we were going to go to Portugal and do 3 different places in Portugal. And I realized very quickly into the planning process, like I have really overshot myself here. So I canceled all of the France and Italy stuff and ate some of that money, but it was so worth it to just spend almost a month in Portugal. We were able, like you said, you're able to soak in the culture. Your kids aren't like it's not as jarring for them. Like they're going to one space, they're settling in. You know, you're making your Airbnb or your hotel or whatever kind of feel like home because you're not just there for 3 days, probably depending on the age of your kids too. But I also like what you said about the over-tourism piece. And someone actually, I have a lot of followers in Europe and I was sharing this story and somebody was like, I'm so glad because you Americans really seem to like to quote unquote do Europe in one fell swoop. And you miss out on so much when you don't come and just like spend some time and relax. You're like trying to hit all of these destinations like it's a bingo card.
Yeah, I mean, as Americans, there's a stereotype about how we basically are super fast paced, like can't slow down, like constantly, trying to pack a lot of things in. Especially even with our work life, like, Europeans are pretty much, many Europeans, I don't want to put them all in a bucket, but I mean, for the most part, work-life balance there and enjoying life and the slow moments of life is a thing. And so I think when there's a stereotype, we come over there and we're trying to see every single thing we can in a short amount of time, which I get it, right? There's a desire to see it's a different part of the world and people are excited and they want to see it all. But when it comes down to it, I think more enjoyment comes from like a bit slower paced and especially with kids. So
yeah, it's easier on the kids too. And I mean, it's so understandable because we get maybe 2 to 4 weeks of paid vacation time a year compared to in Europe, they get like a month or 2. So it makes sense why people want to pack a lot in. So you and your wife, how do you manage the kids' childcare and education? I really want to hear about this because this is kind of another hot topic. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I would love to hear more about your childcare and school situation. We'll be right back. Back with Ben from the FUNemployed Family. He's been traveling with his kids for the past, 7 years now? And your kids are getting to be school age. Your oldest is the same age as my son, who's in 1st grade. So I'd love to hear, because this is kind of a big topic right now, is like homeschooling versus public schools. And you're doing kind of something totally different and maybe a little bit in between. So how are you guys approaching education? How have you approached childcare? Tell us about how that works when you're full-time traveling.
Yeah, of course. So when we were, up until my daughter started kindergarten, which would have been, I guess, the fall of 2022, we were a bit more carefree. Like we had some daycare situations. She was in a Young Five program for a few months when we were in Michigan visiting family, but it was a bit hodgepodge. And so we knew at a time, there was going to be a time where we probably would have to settle down, and that's been the biggest thing that we've been talking about for years, literally leading up to it, is like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? So in fall of 2022, or in early 2022, we decided let's move to Tahoe for a year. Where we're going to rent a house there, not buy, and we're going to see if we can, make it our home, and if we can kind of, control our itchy feet wanting to move and go to new places all the time. It was always our happy place when we were in the Bay Area. We loved Tahoe. So we moved to Tahoe when fall came around to enroll her in kindergarten. We did that in a traditional public school in South Lake Tahoe. And it was okay. Like, it was one of those, like we were both raised in public state, funded schools, and didn't think much of it as we were growing up. But I think times have changed, and now being in the parent shoes, you really do critique the education in the school and how you want your child to be taught. So we didn't love it, but it didn't hate it. It was okay. Our daughter seemed to like it. She enjoyed it. But around 6 months into that, we had found out about a company called Boundless Life, and they basically, when we learned about them, we thought, wow, this is the solution we've been looking for. So they basically provide, they were a new company, only about a year old at the time, but they were opening locations around the world, primarily focused in Europe, where there'd be a community setting where they basically come into a town. They open up an education center. They provide co-working space for the families, and they also provide furnished apartments for the families. And you come from like a 3-month cohort, and you can come and join, and there'd be 25 to 30 families there. So a decent amount of kids at the education center, age range, from 1 to 12, basically focused on families with young kids. And you get to live there in that location abroad, have a co-working space. So like it was perfect for us. And then the kids were at an education center, kind of a Montessori base for the younger kids, with a splash of like a Finnish education system, which is very much experiential learning, individualized type learning, as well as I always like to say it's got a little bit of dash of like Waldorf in there, because it's got a lot of creativity that's included in the curriculum. As well as like kind of like a bit of like a forest school. Like they spend a lot of time outside and learning through experiences that way. So we thought, this is great. We took her out of kindergarten. We went to Tuscany in Italy for 3 months and fell in love with the whole system. We thought it would just be a one-time thing. We actually put all of our stuff in storage in Tahoe, including our car. We're like, well, we'll be back in 3 months. We didn't end up opening that storage unit for 16 months. So when we left to go to Italy, we thought we'd be back. But a couple weeks in, we're like, man, this is amazing. We have to see if we can keep this going. And so all the locations they open, the curriculum is the same across. It's seamless for the kids to move from one to the other location, and then the families can move as well. So it's just fantastic. We ended up doing Bali in the fall of 2023 with Boundless Life, and then we rolled into winter. We did Portugal, January, February, March of 2024, and then we did Syros, Greece for April, May, June of this year, 2024. And so she basically finished her first grade year through Boundless Life. And now we're joining Kotor, Montenegro. We're leaving the US in about a week. We'll be there for the fall, and then we're going to be in Spain in the winter. So like we're rolling into her second grade year.
You're really hitting all of their, because I've been looking at this company for years, so I know all of their destinations. It sounds like you're hitting almost all of them.
Yeah, by January we'll have been to all 6. As of now, we've been to the 4 that they had open. They just opened Kotor in July, so we're heading there now, and then they're opening Spain in September, so we'll be there in January.
Do you know if they have plans to open any more?
Yeah,
like outside of Europe or in other places, they do have plans to expand.
Yeah, they've been going maybe like 2 a year. And I know they're looking in South America. They have a lot of families want to do this, but maybe don't have the time zone flexibility, right? To go work in Europe or to work in Asia. So I think a focus is to bring some back into like the North and South American time zones. So I know there's a focus there. Yeah. So yeah, we've been doing that. It's been, and then of course for our son, he can join the program as well. And he'll be in the 4 and 5-year-old classroom this year. We're super excited.
And so they get to meet friends from all over the world. Is language ever a barrier when you're traveling in these places for the kids? How do they manage that? Yeah,
so the schools are all set up. Their English education, all the education side is done in English, but they do have culture time every day and some of the teachers are actually hired locally from that town. So my daughter was learning how to write her name in Greek, and my younger son was learning the colors in Greek when we were there. So like there's cultural immersion that way. They do field trips every other week into the town, and it's been fantastic. We couldn't have asked for anything more. And over time, since I love the program so much, I've actually joined their team now to like help families, guide them through the process, basically, of learning about the different locations and booking a cohort. It's now we're fully embedded. We're a boundless family for sure now.
So, okay, I told you at the beginning I was going to ask you your favorite destination ever and your least favorite. Have you thought of those? Or is it too hard to pick one?
Oh man, I think I probably have an answer for one of our favorites. The least favorite is tough because we like a lot of places. We don't normally come away from them thinking like, "Ugh, no, I don't want to go back." Mm-hmm. For favorite though, we've been to Thailand quite a few times. We love Koh Lanta, Thailand, and it is just a mixture of like. There's a backpacker vibe there, so it's like real chill. and families. Like there's not parties, there's no like full moon parties and all the stuff that you hear about in Thailand. The beaches are amazing and they all face west. And so you get these epic sunsets, these long beaches that are very shallow water that you can go out like 100 to 200 feet and you're up to your knees. So it's great for kids, especially young kids. And all these restaurants are right there on the beach, in the sand. And they literally bring out like a laundry basket full of like plastic toys for for all the kids to play with. And like the kids walk by and say, "Oh, I want to go to this restaurant because look at the toys they have." So the kids are happy. You're there able to like enjoy a meal or a drink, watch the sun. It's an amazing place. And it's very low key. People are super kind. So Koh Lanta, Thailand is really high on our list. We've been there 3 times, I think, with our daughter, and now once with both of them. Least favorite or places that at least we just maybe didn't have the experience that we thought?
Yeah, even just places that are like not as kid friendly as you would have liked.
Okay, I've got a couple actually. And one, we went to Penang, Malaysia, which I think in general is a fantastic place. We came off of time in Thailand that was like I just described. It's like this chillax beach mode that we were there for like a month, to Penang, which we didn't expect to be such a big like city. Like that to get from our Airbnb like to go across to the market was like an 8-lane highway, and we're like, oh my god. So that was a bit of like shock to us. But other like that was one spot that we just didn't feel as kid friendly as we were hoping. And then I know we went to Jamaica on the baby moon for our son. So our daughter was like 3, and we went to a couple places. We were there for a couple weeks. Didn't do any of the resorts. We did it on our own. We just came away. I don't know. We just came away thinking like, okay, it just didn't feel like what we thought it was going to feel. I don't know. Well, we got a good sense of it, and we didn't go and do a ton of the over touristy things either. We tried to do it on our own. I don't know. Just one of those things that, we'll check a different Caribbean island next time, I guess. I don't know.
Can you tell us a little bit about your global destination matrix? What does this do and who is it meant for?
Yeah. So I put this together. There's over 550 locations in this file that I put together. This is where my finance and accounting nerdiness came back.
Financy.
But basically, we always like I mentioned earlier in that first year, we were trying to follow the weather and the sun and the warmth, and stay away from rainy seasons and follow that path. And it got me thinking, a lot of times we get these questions from families that reach out on social media saying, hey, where's a good place to go in February? We want it to be warm and not rainy. And so we get these kind of questions a lot. And I thought, how cool would it be if you had one document that you could filter by region of the world, by like precipitation level by month, or average, high temperature or low temperature by month. So I put this document together. It's got like 550 locations around the world, categorized by continent and by region, and then also has a cost of living index in there as well. So, for example, say you can only travel, like say for whatever reason your work schedules only allow you to travel in the month of March, but you want to go somewhere that's between like 70 and 80 degrees, and you don't want it to be a lot, you don't want there to be much precipitation, and you prefer it to be in Asia. You can filter on all of these different categories, and then you can say, I want it to be on a scale of 1 to 10. I want it to be 5 and under on the budget, like the lower cost. You just filter all of these columns, and then all of a sudden, there come back your destinations based on that. So you can easily find a place around the world that will have the type of weather and the cost structure that you're looking for. So I put it together, and it's like my first digital project that I ever made, and I use it all the time myself. So
it's so affordable. It's like $6. I mean, it's crazy that somebody can get an amazing resource like that for under $10. So thank you for putting that together. Parents don't have a ton of time to plan. That's the other thing. It's the other barrier to doing something like this, is like, how do you find the time to plan all this stuff and research everything? And that's why accounts like yours are so helpful too. You share so many helpful family travel tips and advice on becoming a digital nomad family. You share destination insights and real life snippets of raising your kids around the world. And you also just have some wonderful dad humor on there. So I really, really appreciate everything you're doing for kids and for families on your page, the FUNemployed Family. My last question for you is not necessarily travel related, but maybe it will be. What is something no one told you before becoming a parent that you wish you knew?
I think no one told us that we could go and do it. I think what we get is that you can't do it. Like we'd always get well, you better get your travel done before you have kids because you'll never be able to get to do it. It'll never be the same. Sure, it's not the same as going on a couple's trip to Hawaii, but it's different and sometimes arguably better as a family because you're doing it, with the people you love the most. But I think the thing that I think most people gave us a negative context to it. It's like, oh, you better get it out of your system. And I don't think anybody really told us that you can just go do it. Go give it a try. And you can't get better at something. You can't feel more comfortable with doing something new unless you go and try it. So that's what we try to tell everybody else as well. It's just, it's not as scary as people around you might be telling you it is.
Absolutely. I think that's such perfect advice. You can find Ben at the FUNemployed Family on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, where he shares his family's journey. Is there anywhere else that listeners can connect with you or find where you guys are in the world at any given moment?
I think Instagram's probably the best for us. We share there probably most frequently. But yeah, I'm always happy to answer DMs and help people with questions. I do that all the time. It's a passion of mine to help other families feel empowered to do this.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been so fun, and I'm definitely going to use this podcast as my own ammunition with my husband. So I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great upcoming trip.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate it.
Are you a parent in need of a laugh and a little escape? Look no further. Parenting is a Joke is the podcast you've been waiting for. Hey, I'm Ophira Eisenberg. I'm a stand-up comic and parent. And each week I chat with one of my top comedian pals who, just like you, are juggling careers, busy lives and schedules, and raising a family. You can expect candid stories, hilarious mishaps that happen on stage and at home, and just a lot of laughs. There's no expert advice here. Well, actually, sometimes a good idea does sneak its way in, but mostly just pure, relatable fun to remind you that we're all in this parenting adventure together. New episodes of Parenting is a Joke drop every Tuesday, so tune in, get ready to laugh, unwind, and maybe even feel a little bit better about your own parenting. Because sometimes that's exactly what your therapist, pediatrician, and bartender ordered. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast platform.